Breaking news. At 22:17 UTC, a coordinated alert pulsed through the global astronomical network. The signal originated not from a single telescope, but from three, separated by continents: the Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile, the European Space Network's Deep Space Radar in New Norcia, Australia, and the aging but vigilant Arecibo Successor Facility in Puerto Rico. They registered the same impossible datum simultaneously. An object, catalogued under the provisional designation 3iAtlas, an interstellar visitor we believed to be tumbling silently through the outer solar system, has just done something that defies every model of cometary or asteroidal behavior. It stopped. And then, with a precision that echoes through the silent halls of monitoring stations, it began to turn. Not a random rotation driven by outgassing or solar pressure, a deliberate, controlled reorientation, aligning its longest axis directly toward the inner solar system, toward us. Today, the impossible happened. This is not an update. This is a recalibration of reality. If you want to understand what comes next, you need to follow this story. Hit subscribe. This changes everything. The credibility of this moment is underpinned by the very architecture of modern science. When the first anomalous readings trickled in, they were treated not as discovery, but as error. The data was triaged at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, the European Space Operations Center in Darmstadt, Australia, and the Independent Monitoring Hub at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. The instruments involved are not backyard telescopes. They are the sentinels of our species. The James Webb Space Telescope, its infrared gaze piercing the dark. The Hubble, still unwavering. The Panoramic Survey Telescope and Rapid Response System in Hawaii, and the global Very Long Baseline Interferometry Network that essentially turns our planet into a single, gigantic radio dish. This was a consensus of steel and silicon, a chorus of the most advanced sensors ever built by human hands, all singing the same discordant note. Before we can grasp the phenomenon, we must trust the observation, and the observation is now irrefutable. The timeline of revelation begins 72 hours before the main event. It started with a whisper in the data. 3iAtlas, a dark, elongated object on a hyperbolic trajectory from the constellation Lyra, had been under routine surveillance since its discovery. Its path was plotted, its rotation period calculated at approximately 8.3 hours. Then, at T-minus 72 hours, the rotation began to slow. Imperceptibly at first, a deviation of 0.02% from the predicted period. The automatic systems flagged it as potential outgassing asymmetry. 11 hours later, the deceleration was unambiguous. The rotation period had increased to 8.7 hours. The object was applying a braking torque. There is no known natural mechanism for a monolithic body in the vacuum of space to uniformly slow its own spin. Outgassing is impulsive, chaotic. This was smooth, controlled. 48 hours before the reorientation event, the second anomaly manifested. The James Webb Space Telescope, performing a routine mid-infrared spectroscopic scan, detected a localized thermal spike. Not a general warming of the surface, but a precise, pinprick hotspot on the object's midsection, registering at 327 Kelvin, far above the expected equilibrium temperature of 45 Kelvin for its distance from the Sun. The hotspot persisted for exactly 47 minutes, then vanished. The energy signature was consistent with a focused energy discharge, but of an unknown type. No particle beam, no laser emission we could detect, just a sudden, contained release of heat, as if a single internal component had been briefly, powerfully activated. The tension built in observatory control rooms. At Caltech, Dr. Aris Thorne's team ran gravitational perturbation models, inputting the new spin data. The software crashed. The software, designed to model natural in-body interactions, could not reconcile the object's motion with any combination of solar gravity, radiation pressure, or tidal forces. It was as if the equations themselves were rejecting the input, Dr. Thorne would later state in an encrypted internal memo. The trajectory refinements were too perfect. There was no noise. In nature, there is always noise. Then came the main event. At 22:17:03 UTC, every instrument trained on 3iAtlas recorded the same sequence. The object's rotation ceased entirely. Absolute rotational stasis. For 83 seconds, it hung, motionless, against the star field, a dark sliver of absolute stillness. Then, with a grace that was chilling to behold in the data plots, it began to pivot. It used no visible thrust. There was no plume, no ejecta. It simply turned, like a needle aligning to a magnet, over a period of 6 minutes and 14 seconds. The final orientation placed its long axis pointing to a spot in space just ahead of Earth's orbital position, with an angular error of less than 0.001 arcseconds. This is a level of precision beyond our own most advanced deep space navigation. It was a gesture, a statement. The scientific community fractured into two camps within hours. The mainstream natural hypothesis, championed by a coalition at ESA and the University of Tokyo, posits an extraordinarily rare but theoretically possible scenario. They suggest 3iAtlas is a fragment of a super-dense, exotic material, perhaps a chunk of a crystallized white dwarf star or a strange matter object. The rotation slowdown and reorientation could be explained by a powerful, localized magnetic moment interacting with the solar magnetic field, and the thermal spike by a sudden subsurface phase transition. They point to the object's slightly anomalous density estimates. We must not jump to extraordinary conclusions, Dr. Lena Volkov argued at an emergency briefing. The universe is full of phenomena we haven't yet cataloged. An unknown natural process is still more likely than a technological one. The alternative interpretation, gaining fierce traction among a younger cohort of astrophysicists and the team at the Galileo Project at Harvard, is simpler and more profound. The object is executing maneuvers. It is under control. The precision of the reorientation, the lack of emissive thrust, the prior calibration of its rotation, these are hallmarks of a guided vehicle or a probe, using physics we do not yet understand for propulsion. Dr. Kenji Miller, a propulsion theorist at Caltech, noted privately, "We look for chemical rockets or ion drives. Their solution might be subtler. They might be manipulating inertial frames or tapping into zero-point energy gradients. The silence of the maneuver is the loudest part. It's not brute force, it's elegance." The debate was raging in secure video conferences when the escalation occurred. 37 hours after the reorientation, the Atacama Array detected a new emission. Not heat, not light, a radio pulse, but not a random burst of static. It was a sequence, a 1-second burst, followed by a 2-second silence, then a 3-second burst, a 5-second silence, a 7-second burst, an 11-second silence, the sequence of prime numbers up to 29. It repeated the cycle 3 times over 6 minutes, then silence returned. This was no longer ambiguous. Prime numbers are the universal signature of intelligence. They are a construct of mathematics, not a product of geology or stellar physics. The object was broadcasting its nature. The human reaction behind the scenes was a mixture of sublime awe and cold procedural dread. In the control room of the Deep Space Network, the technician who first saw the prime number sequence decode on her screen reportedly said nothing. She simply stood up, walked to the window, and stared at the night sky for 10 minutes. Internal communications at major space agencies shifted to dedicated encrypted channels, codenamed Sentinel and Longview.
press officers were given holding statements citing ongoing calibration and analysis of intriguing data from interstellar object 3iAtlas. The silence from official channels was to the informed observer deafening. Subtle effects began to ripple across Earth's own technological sphere. 12 hours after the prime number transmission, the Sworn satellite constellation, which monitors Earth's magnetic field, detected a fleeting, localized perturbation in the magnetosphere, a tiny ripple that seemed to propagate from the direction of 3iAtlas. It was minute, a fluctuation of a few nanoteslas, but its timing was impeccable. Simultaneously, an experimental quantum communication satellite in geostationary orbit experienced a burst of decoherence in its entangled particles, a scrambling that lasted for precisely the duration of the prime number signal. The engineers logged it as an unexplained solar particle event, but the solar wind was